Thanks, Ali, for the introduction. Very much pleased to be here today. I have been visiting with the Drugs Task Force before. Back we were discussing hidden harm in the early stages of the launch of the strategic statement and practice guide back in 2019, which seems an age ago now. And very much impressed at the time about the really good practice, especially with Barnarda's, but the collaboration that was happening with TUSLA and the Drug and Alcohol Task Force at the time. And I do think this collaboration is now at a point where nationally we have very clear pathway for the HSE and TUSA to work in partnership, I suppose, in working together, connecting our practice as practitioners. But I think there's a wider, I suppose, imperative that hidden harm is a business of all professionals and practitioners in the community. And I do see the review of the overall Reducing Harm Supporting Recovery midterm review being very timely. And we would and have, I suppose, advocated that there would be a wider network of support really addressing and promoting early intervention and support for families with children at the centre, which is hidden harm. So maybe just to say in response to this morning, nationally, TUSA and the HSE have been working together really for a long time on this project, but it has been very much about a partnership approach, about connecting our practice, about naming hidden harm as a risk factor, but also about having what we would call trained practitioners working together in order to, first of all, address and identify these invisible children within our practice and working together to make sure that supports are provided at the earliest point, but also at the different pathways and transitions, right from pregnancy right up to adolescence. So part of our journey has been around how we got to that point about having practice learning sites that helped develop the practice guidance, which has been there now since January 2019. But also we had the benefit of an expert, Joy Barlow from Scotland, who actually drafted the practice guide with HSE and TUSA colleagues across the country, practice learning sites in Dublin Southwest, in the Midlands and in the Northwest and Donegal. And that model of the learning site is what we would like to see replicated across the country, really, in terms of whether it's Drugs and Alcohol Task Force working together, or through our child and family support networks, in particular, through our early intervention response pathway. We have that pathway, we have that network of support across the country, and we really welcome to have much more collaboration in relation to that. But we have, I suppose, at this point, really, I suppose, an ask from yourselves, what is the national implementation plan? How can we have a public-facing awareness piece on this? And I do think there's two levers for that. I think one, we do have what we call the National Oversight Committee for the Reducing Harm Supporting Recovery. We do have a whole of government approach to that. So I do think that ask around a whole of government approach to early intervention awareness needs to be keenly looked at, especially in terms of Better Outcomes, Brighter Futures, to join up all of that work. But also I think we have an opportunity, I suppose, to sort of, I suppose, give the voices of children an opportunity at this point through the lived experience, through the Barnarda's piece, through these network opportunities of training, and also learning together, that we actually come together to work much more closely, especially TUSA, the HSE and the Drugs Task Force. I think in particular, we have an opportunity to work really closely, but also in terms of the opportunity now that we have nationally. We have our e-learning, which is open to all of the HSE, TUSLA and community and voluntary sector to go in and do the e-learning, which is very much evidence informed, very much an engagement with services in producing that e-learning, but also in relation to classroom training that we're hoping to run in the autumn once we have, I suppose, our services open and being able to do that. Just want to say a little bit about collaboration in particular, because I do think, and some of the learning from the practice learning sites, is the whole concept of trust. And I really don't see that we can overcome, I suppose, the barrier of trust without having really good, proactive, supportive relationships, offer of support to families in our services. And having that supportive relationship being really how we do our business across all services, but also how we work together. And I suppose that is the challenge of interagency working, and how we share information, but also how we provide what we would call seamless support and referral pathways for families, but also for children to have that voice and referral pathways and support in their own right. So I do think that we have an opportunity at the moment, I suppose, with a very clear goal and common agreement that we need to be more proactive in this space. And I do think we do, as a joint and a communion of voices, we can work together through the structures like the National Oversight Committee, through our CIPSEs, our Children and Young People Services Committees, but also through our local child and family support networks, that we're all engaged in that work, that we're involved in really improving access and having the concept of a no wrong door in communities. So I really welcome, in particular, the collaboration with PPFS, Kevin Webster in particular, the principal social worker, and Barry Cullen, who have really taken on board the necessity of operating a really good implementation plan locally, and nationally. We'd be really keen to follow that and learn from it. So congratulations, I suppose, to get to this point and to have this thinking and this really clear model that we would be seeing as something that could be looked at nationally, in particular in terms of any future funding for a drug and alcohol task force, that hidden harm is a priority in terms of funding, in particular around family support. So I'd like to hand over to Nicola, who's done a lot of work, just to give you an example of the work that's gone into delivering the e-learning, but also the upcoming classroom training, because I think some of the issues that have come up in terms of trauma-informed practice, in terms of understanding and working together with the common skills and engaging with parents in particular. So Nicola, is it okay for you to come in here? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. And thanks, Barry, for inviting us here today. I'm really sorry. I had a lovely presentation for everybody this morning that Caroline and I had worked on last week, but unfortunately I can't access anything on my system because I have a HSE system and I'm on my personal phone and I'm hoping to God it doesn't ring. So forgive me if it's a little bit haphazard here this morning. Look, I wanted to talk about training, and it's interesting that Jennifer mentioned training, as did Sharon earlier on. So as Caroline's given you a background there to the practice sites, and there were stakeholder consultations back in 2014 from those practice sites involving the commissioners, researchers, the service providers, practitioners, people using the services. And the findings from that stakeholder consultation showed a couple of key areas that they felt could be progressed. And there were three that stood out that maybe we could address through training: learning and development, the interagency working piece, and referral pathways. And also there were three key themes that came out of that stakeholder consultation: the effect of alcohol and other drug use on parental capacity, impact on the child, and the impact on the parent. So they were the three themes and the pieces that we were looking at when we first started discussing training. As Caroline said, the training is a collaborative piece. So in February 2019, we established a training development group. And on that were HSE and TUSLA, and we decided to take a blended learning approach. Sorry, now you can hear me turning pages. The blended learning approach was around having an e-learning piece followed by a skills practice. So with the e-learning, at the time, what we were thinking was, when that skills practice is so important, but that we want everybody coming into the room to have the same base knowledge about hidden harm, and what are the pieces that we can take out of the classroom and put into a piece to give someone a base knowledge around hidden harm. What is it? Who does it affect? And in what ways? And we also wanted people who won't have an opportunity or who don't attend a skills-based one-day training to have an understanding of what hidden harm is, and to begin to think about how they can, where their place is in that, where does hidden harm fit within what we're doing. So I suppose the key piece around the e-learning really was to recognise and respond to the impact of parental alcohol and other drug use on children. and to support services to understand and respond to hidden harm. As Caroline said, it is available. Sorry, phone. It is available on HSE land to all HSE, TUSLA and our community and voluntary sector. It's also available on a separate platform to probation and homeless services. So yeah, I suppose linking it back into that stakeholder consultation on the interagency piece and the referral pathways. So by the end of the e-learning, what we wanted people to understand really was to finish that, recognizing the impact of hidden harm on children and young people, to be able to see ways in which they could support the parent, and to work in partnership with parents and other services to meet the needs of the child and young person. We did this across a number of modules, and it has been mentioned by earlier speakers around the impact of hidden harm on the various age groups, right through from pregnancy right through to young people. So that's the way we approach the e-learning as well. In Module 1, we look exclusively at the impact of hidden harm on the child throughout the different age group brackets, and we used the voice of the child throughout that module. So for example, we have pieces in there from St. Leo's College in Carlow, who did a really interesting video on their young people, 15, 16 years of age, on the impact of hidden harm in their lives. We have younger children. So we really wanted to get across this from a perspective of a child, and the voice of the child is throughout the entire e-learning. The voice of the parent was in module 2, and we consulted with a service on that, and we had a lady using that service who was very generously allowed us to have a conversation with her that was recorded that we use in the e-learning. And mainly that was to learn from the parent around how we communicate and how that's understood, and the impact of our communication styles and the language that we use on how they feel as parents and how supported they feel. And it's really important, and it was very generous of her to do that. In module 3, we look at how we can work together. And again, there's some video pieces in there, recorded conversations between a family support service, TUSLA, the representative from the National Drug Treatment Centre, and they're having a conversation and giving a couple of examples about how we can work together and also the challenges involved in that. So I suppose that's the e-learning, and it is available. It's up online. Anyone can access it, and I would encourage you to. It's a very good base and very clear examples. The voice of the child is very strong throughout, and it is around how we can support parents and work together to do so. The skills training then is the other piece. We have had to develop the skills training throughout the COVID period. So we had just started it when COVID hit and face-to-face was not possible. So it's a one-day skills program, and we would, the way we have, I suppose, a vision for how it will be implemented is that it will be co-facilitated by HSE and TUSLA. The idea is to provide an environment for us all to consider the impact of hidden harm on our own practice and how we can work together to support the parent and the child. It's the same narrative, I suppose, around anything that we do with hidden harm. What's very clear is that it's not about expecting drug and alcohol service staff to become experts in social work or experts in child protection or experts in any of TUSLA's work. And it's not about TUSLA staff becoming experts in drug and alcohol use and in adult services. It's not about that, actually. And I think it was brought up earlier. I think it was Sharon who mentioned it, around how people are nervous about how their client group will react if they start asking questions that they didn't before about parenting. And so that's part of the aim of the skills-based training. So I had a quote here from Monroe. I hope you don't mind if I read it out, because it kind of summed up, we kind of referred back to it a good bit when we were developing the training. Professionals are seen to be working in silos with good intentions, but with a focus on their specific client group. This has often resulted in the needs of children being lost in a plethora of adult needs. And that's certainly what we felt from the get-go when we came together as HSE and TUSLA to develop this training. What were the key pieces that we needed to look at? And that was one of them. And our expectations of staff and what their expectations are. Also to note that during that day in the skills training, and it relates back to Sharon, what you were showing again, that very clear example of the young boy and what a day in his life is like. We, at the beginning of the skills training, we create Jenny and her family and what her family looks like. And throughout the day, every example, every exercise, we will always ask as facilitators, what is the impact of that though on Jenny? How will that impact on Jenny and her caregivers? And to relate it constantly throughout the day to Jenny, who we have created from our own experience in the room quite early on. I think I should also mention quickly, I see you there, Barry, I'm probably out of time, but what I should mention quickly as well is that during the COVID period since last March, a lot of training programs have gone on to a virtual classroom and have been very successful. We have completed the skills-based training. It's ready. We haven't been able to pilot it yet. That's the next step. But we decided, the decision was made not to deliver it in a virtual classroom because really two key reasons. We want everybody in the room together to discuss what misconceptions we have about the work that the other does. And by everybody, I mean HSC, TUSLA, community and voluntary sector. What are all our responsibilities? And we also want to look at that interagency piece, talk it out, discuss it. The other piece is, I suppose, key, which is around creating referral pathways and knowing what referral pathways are in your area. So that's all pieces that would be covered and are best covered by being in the room together. So it is a one day. I suppose is around next steps for the training. We need to pilot that training and make sure it's solid and make any amendments necessary. And then, as part of the training implementation plan, we'll have to do identify trainers, train the trainer, and then schedule it. And it's a key step in implementing Hidden Harm overall. So finally, thank you. I'm sorry it's all a little haphazard this end. I'm looking forward to really learning more. I've learned more already from Jennifer and Sharon. And it's great to see what will come of the local implementation of this, and we look forward to learning more. Thanks very much.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Caroline and Nicola, for just really sharing what is happening in each of your services and what you see should happen, and particularly hearing about all of the training and the e-learning. And actually on that, Nicola, there is a great sort of question there from John in the chat, just saying, could we get a link to the e-learning? And I know it's difficult at the moment with not getting access to everything, but if you have a link to that either now or later, and I can send it out in a follow-up later. But do you have anything? Yeah. I
can't access anything, but what I can say is if you log on to HSEland, HSELAND.ie, you can register there. Most people will have been registered anyway for their child protection training, so use your same login. And if you, in the search in there, just put in Hidden Harm, you'll be able to get on. It's about a 90-minute e-learning. There's a quiz at the end as well. And it will be mandatory to complete that before the skills-based training, when we hope to do it in the autumn.
Okay, great, thanks. I'll have to look that up as a hyperlink later, but hopefully that gives a good indication.
Yeah, sorry about
people.
that.
No, that's fantastic. So thank you so